Today I'm joined by Jeff Okrepkie, Vice Mayor of District 6 of Santa Rosa and a leader deeply rooted in the community. Jeff brings a unique perspective combining his work in the private sector with his role in local government. After the devastation of the Tubbs fire, he didn't just rebuild. He led founding Coffey Strong to support hundreds of families through recovery. Now in public office, he's focused in infrastructure, safety, and building a more resilient city. This conversation is about what leadership actually looks like when the stakes are real. Jeff, welcome to Protea Conversations.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I'm excited for this conversation. I always knew you were an interesting person, but doing my research, like I've heard the stories before, but maybe not totally comprehended everything that you've gone through in the last 4 years, really finding your space in the world of leadership through adversity within the community. And now you find yourself as Vice Mayor, District 6, Santa Rosa City Council, which is quite the title.
Yeah, Santa Rosa City Council member for District 6, which is Northwest Santa Rosa. And then also my colleagues voted me in as vice mayor for the last 6 months and then to the end of the year.
What does a vice mayor do?
Not as much as the mayor, and only slightly more than regular council members. So it's very similar in stature, is kind of like, or responsibility as like a vice president.
Okay.
And obviously not in the grand scale of things, but
Yeah.
we're in on all the conversations. We, if there's like, hey, we need to make a decision on this subject or have a conversation about this thing that's going on, it's usually the mayor and I that are in those conversations. And should the mayor leave town, technically the acting mayor, if there's an emergency and our emergency operations center opens up, I go there as one of the two leads for policymakers and city council to interact with staff and figure out what's going on.
That's kind of a big deal. I mean, that's quite a position, looking after your community in that role.
Yeah, it's not flashy by any means, and it does rotate. We don't have an independently elected mayor, independently elected, citywide elected council members. So it's rotating, but it is kind of a signal that your colleagues believe that you can handle a little bit more responsibility and that you are capable of doing the mayor's job in very small bites, should that arise.
Fascinating. I'm still trying to get my head around local politics in general in the U.S. I say that in the same way as that I think people that have lived in the U.S. their whole life are still trying to get their heads around local politics.
For sure.
It is quite I'd say a fairly complex system at the city level in terms of the way the positions act and the rotations and all that goes into it. And I don't want to become some sort of a local politics education session, because I don't think that will keep too many people listening. But it is interesting, to sort of start, when you start digging and finding out the bits and pieces of it. But what I'm more interested in is sort of how you got into politics, because you've never been a lifetime career politician, though it looks like you did do some early work, in the world of politics in your career. How did you find yourself in this position within the city council?
Yeah, so the early part of my career you mentioned, when I was at Arizona State University, I interned for about 7 months with United States Senator John McCain and did what's called constituent casework. So whenever someone says, write your senator, I was the one who would take those phone calls or read those letters and determine where those go. A common example I'll use is somewhere along, if someone went to Europe, met a woman, married them, was trying to bring them back over, and their immigration status was held up, they would reach out to us. We would call, find out whether it was with Homeland Security or the FBI, where their background checks works. This is post 9/11, so it was a little bit more intense, and kind of get things moving and grease the wheels on the political bureaucracy that exists, or government bureaucracy that exists. So that's kind of what I would do, and then also tell people hey, we can't help you with your prison time and your legal case, because that is a different branch of government. Talk to an attorney or a judge about that. So that's kind of what I did initially, and it was tough and rewarding. We got yelled at a lot on the phone, a lot of angry people about, this was in Arizona, so immigration obviously a hot topic.
Yep.
And I had a lot of fun, and I was lining up to go out on it. This is during his presidential campaign, to go out on his presidential campaign. And for those that don't remember it, John McCain's presidential campaign started out hot and then kind of tanked, and was able to ignite and gain some momentum, and ultimately got the nomination for the Republican Party. And so, but I was supposed to go out like right when it tanked. And then I was told, we don't have any money. We can't send you anywhere. So that's, I moved on in my professional life. Fast forward, I don't know, 13, 14 years. And it, I was living with my at the time girlfriend in our rental at Coffey Park neighborhood here in Santa Rosa. And in 2017, the Tubbs fires hit, and we lost our home in the Tubbs fire. We had a son who was about to be 2 years old at the time, and so we were lucky enough to have renter's insurance. Being I would be a poor insurance professional if I didn't have renter's insurance. Financially, we were okay. I won't say that we were perfectly set up, but we were okay. And I was taking some time away from work, the whole mental aspect of losing everything and what are we going to do with our future and all that. And me, my wife, our son, and our two dogs were living in the guest room of my parents' house. So I was trying to find some sort of like, I don't want to say purpose, but something to keep my mind active, if I wasn't working full time. And I didn't want to dwell on my loss because that was, too much to handle at the time. So being in insurance and also working with, I deal with a lot of developers and general contractors. And then at the time, my father was on Windsor Town Council, and he served as mayor a couple times. There's these Facebook groups of survivors and our neighborhood, and people were saying things that here's what they're going to do when they rebuild. And I know there was a lot of like optimism and looking forward that was trying to be used to kind of deal with the aftermath and the trauma that comes with what happened. But my concern was people were going to latch onto that and think they could really accomplish some things that just weren't true. The process wasn't correct, that weren't true. So like at the time, there was this big thing going around about Tesla making solar shingles. And people were like, oh, I'm going to put those on. And being an insurance, I was like, well, your insurance isn't paying for that. So like, don't say you're going to go out and get those like that. So I started talking to some people, and I was like, all right, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put together a panel of an insurance professional that does personal lines, which I don't do, a general contractor to somebody from the city government, and somebody that understands the process of getting things done. Because it's a very specific process to get a house built, right? You have to do some very certain things. And so I put together a panel, put it out to my neighbors. Maybe 150 people came, and we talked for a few hours about how this process is going to go. And it ended, and I thought I did my good deed. The very next day, I started getting contacted and people reaching out asking, when's the next one? When's the next one? And in my head, I was like, there wasn't going to be a next one. Like I thought I was done. So I had gotten introduced to the county supervisor that represents our area and that Dad knows. And we started talking about recovery and what we could do. And we decided we were going to put together a larger one. And at the time, FEMA and debris removal and CalOES, there was a lot of confusion around that. So we decided we're going to make a bigger one. And it was held at the Luther Burbank Center. Over 200 people showed up. And at that time, we kind of developed this thing, what's called the block captain system, which is a representational recovery model. And we basically took the entirety of our neighborhood of Coffey Park and drew these arbitrary lines. And we're like, if you're east of this street and north of this street, you are in section 1, zone 1. So you go over to that side. And, if you're in this other area, you're in zone 2, go over to that side. And we started meeting and kind of gathering data and information and trying to figure out what issues there were. And ended up forming this neighborhood group called Coffey Strong, which incorporated as a 501c3 for rebuilding. And we helped our neighbors rebuild as much as possible. And through that, I met some people at the city, including the a council member for our district who then became mayor. He appointed me to planning commission because he thought I would do a good job. I served on planning commission for 4 years. And when that council member, Tom Schwedhelm, decided he wasn't going to run again, he saw the work that I had done within the community. He saw the work I had done on planning commission, and he encouraged me to run. And once I got approval from my bosses at work and my boss at home, I was able to really, put my full effort into running and get elected. It's one of those things I always joke with people where it's like, I mean, in the back of your mind, everyone just sits there and be like, oh, well, I could do this or I could do that, right? So in the back of my mind, I'm like, I think I would be a really good councilman. I think I could do a good job. And I would ask like my people I know, and they're like, yeah, I think you'd do a really good job. But like, if you ask your wife if you'd be good at something and she says yes, in the back of your mind, it's kind of like your mom telling you you're good at art when you're 5 years old, right? Like, you kind of have to say that. But when industry groups and other key stakeholders in the city say like, no, you would be really good. We want you to do this. That's when it really sank in, and I ran, and then I ended up getting elected.
Yeah, it's quite the story. And from everything I've heard, you've been a great city council member, and it obviously shows now that you're vice mayor. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, congratulations on that. And obviously, I think from the community in general, and I'll say that even as somebody that doesn't live in Santa Rosa, just like thank you for all your hard work. I mean,
Oh,
the Tubbs thing was obviously just absolutely brutal, right? It's like
mhm.
1,300 homeowners, right? It's somewhere in that
1,300
range.
homeowners in my neighborhood alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5,000 structures total in unincorporated county in the city of Santa Rosa.
Yeah, and I sort of vaguely remember that time. Sometimes like everything pre-COVID seems to just be a bit of a blur. But like I remember like seeing like notices on message boards of people with like these grandeur plans on what they're going to rebuild, and it was just like it doesn't make sense. Like I don't know insurance that well, but I know it enough to know that you're not going to double the size of your house that you bought in 1950 or whenever the houses were first built, like 17. Like the cost of building has gone up significantly, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming that was part of the reason for these panels is to sort of really educate people on
Yeah.
what the reality is going to look like, rather like than these big, beautiful plans that everybody had in their
Yeah,
minds.
and it was even simple as things as like as soon as debris removal is done, I'm going to start, building my house. And I was like, well, hold on, you've got to get it graded, and there's got to be drainage. There's certain engineering that goes into it, so that for flooding and stuff like that. And then you've got to do a soils report, and then you've got to, you know, uh, do all these other things. And I was like, it's not to say that you can't do what you want down the line, but you're not going to be able to do it the next day. And so don't get your hopes up. Ground yourself in reality. Hope for the best, but ground yourselves in reality.
I mean, because there's like investigations and all sorts of stuff going on as well, right? Like there were like,
Yeah, yeah, there were. People did pass away, so there were recovery efforts of remains. There were, yeah, uh, investigations into the cause, all those kinds of things.
a lot of things against people in that situation after what is clearly a devastating. Like I cannot comprehend just losing everything. It just beyond me. I can sympathize with people. I can think about like some of the worst situations in my life, but I still can't comprehend. Like I have everything and now I have nothing. It seems like a
It's
lot.
it is. It's still hard for me to comprehend. I mean, there's still time. I mean, to this day, there's times where I'm like, I have to think and be like, all right, did I have this item or this shirt before the fire? Or did I get it after the fire? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I don't know if I lost it or not, and I got to think of like, well, no, that was before the fire. So okay, so that's gone. Like replacing things. A story I usually tell people is that my wife and I don't really like believe in the whole go out on Valentine's Day to dinner and flowers and all this kind of stuff. So we've created this tradition where we just cook together at home and spend time with each other. And so with our young son, we were decided we are going to make homemade pizzas, and we needed a rolling pin. And this is in February. We had lost our home in October. So this is 4.5 months later. Well, we had never bought a rolling pin because we'd never needed it. So we're sitting there on Valentine's Day to try to make, our homemade pizzas using a can of beans to roll out the dough because that's all we had. It's just
Yeah.
it's when you try to think of everything you own, both just physically and emotionally, like the things you're tied to, right? That's it's really hard to wrap your head around what that means to you. So I don't know. It's hard. It's one of those hard things to grasp, right? That kind of like space is nothing, but it's expanding. So it's expanding into nothing, and it's never ending. And you start thinking like all these like, how does that make sense? How does it make
Yeah.
sense that like this thing I've had my whole life, my
Well, just
very
like that's just like a convenience, right? It's like there's something I should have, and then you go look and you're like, I don't. Like it was just
yeah.
taken away from me so quickly.
Yeah, and then the personal items, there's the whole emotional toll of like the things that mean a lot to you personally that
Mm.
I don't share it often, but like there's things that I can remember when I left my house, I stood at our back door and I was like, all right, did I get everything? And there was things that were like within arm's reach, like super close that I didn't grab. And I don't know if that's because I forgot, because I was in a state of panic, or because I was in a state of denial where I didn't really think this was going to happen, you
Yeah.
know? But I know I had neighbors that didn't take their cats because they thought they would be back. Like it's a hard thing to come to grips with before it happens, as it's happening, and after it
But just hard, just hard. I mean, it was tough times, I think, for
happens.
all surrounding communities. All those things were really tough. But being in the middle of it, it's brutal. And I'm sure to this day there's still moments, and I can't imagine the paranoia every time of there's a local little fault fire, that pops up that's just like the
Oh,
panic that might ensue every time.
the number of apps and bookmarks I have on my phone so I can pull up as much data as I can very quickly is a lot. Yeah, and then there's just things like it's funny. People are always like, "Oh, when you smell smoke, do you get anxious or do you get PTSD?" Cliche term they use PTSD. And it's
Hmm.
like, no. The thing that really gets me is because what started that fire was these hyper fast winds, 80 to 100 mile an hour winds that are common to this area. We get the Diablo winds, but we don't get that fast. So when
Yeah,
we have really heavy winds and like windows start to shake, that is when I don't sleep. That is when, I tense up. But it's like any other trauma, you don't really get over it. You just learn to live with it and move past it.
it's really interesting that you say that because, like, I find myself, living through that time, not being in the situation. I don't think much about when there's a fire or a notice, but when there is heavy wind, even if there's no fire, I do find myself like all of a sudden checking my phone a lot more. It is like, just as you mentioned, like the wind has definitely created this weird like reflex in my brain, and I wasn't, I didn't lose anything. I wasn't in
Yeah.
that fire. I'm all the way down in Nevada, like I'm far away from it, but that's an interesting insight that is sort of, what stuck to you and sort of created that reaction that I can't imagine what it must feel like at that time.
Yeah, I mean, and the number of people that didn't lose their homes that still have things like, like the Watch Duty app is kind of like, in Sonoma County is almost as important as your email app on your phone, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, there you see a Cal Fire plane going over, and it's like, where's that thing going?
Yeah,
What's that smoke from? You know,
yeah,
it's just it's one of those things you deal with. I was texting with my friend a couple weeks ago who lives in Kansas City, and they had really bad tornado warnings and storms out there. It's the where you choose to live in this world. Mother Nature, finds a way, whether it's the desert or extreme blizzards or tornadoes or earthquakes, whatever. It's just something we all have to. We're all a part of this larger scale of life that we have to adhere to and don't have control over.
yeah. I mean, at least, I mean, you've been able to channel it into something really good and help the community and do that. And I know obviously there's been other devastating fires since, and there was the ones that down in LA, and you've been involved in some way or format in that process and being helping out there as well. So can you
Yeah.
share sort of what you've been helping with and doing down there?
Yeah, I've become a so I make the joke it's like being called the best quarterback to never win a Super Bowl, right? It's a flattering title that you don't really want. So I become the subject matter expert on neighborhood fire recovery. And so I have gone to Boulder, Colorado, Redding, Paradise, Altadena, the Palisades, going to Maui in 2 weeks. I've met with people from Santa Cruz. I've met with people from Australia, Canada, just kind of like trying to, it's this compulsive need to share information that I have that I didn't have at the time. And I know that they don't have because they haven't ever had to think about it.
Yeah.
So, it's the truest form of pay it forward. And then for advocacy, I've gone to Washington, D.C. to advocate for some fire recovery efforts. And yeah, it's just, it'd be nice if I never had to go through it, but I don't know if I'd be the person I am today if I didn't. I don't know if I'd be on council. I don't know if I would be as knowledgeable on the subject. It's just one of those things where you deal with the cards that are dealt to you and make the best of them. And so, I've made some really good friends through it too. I have friends in most of those areas that I still text with, and it's been a really personally rewarding experience, but that's not why I do it. That's just the bonus of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always like, when people like those words, it's like, I do get satisfaction from this terrible situation, right? Like, and that's the words sound weird, especially if I say them, but
Mhm.
I totally get that, right? Like, you're able to give back. You're able to, you've gone through something, and it's probably part of the healing as well, right? Like, you're never gonna forget, but at the same time, like, this is like your own way
Yeah.
of rebuilding the home in your head rather than the home that was lost, right? And
Right. It's a really cathartic thing, right? Because you kind of like everyone always, the question I'll get all the time is, do you mind me asking? Is it okay if I ask about, what happened to you during the fires? And I've said my story so many times to reporters and electeds and survivors all over the country that like I have a rehearsed version of it that like, and it's like, no, I can tell you my story and what happened. And to the layman who's never had to experience it. It sounds awful, but for me, it's just like I'm able to communicate to you just how bad it was and how traumatizing it was without it personally affecting me on an emotional level in that moment. That's also because like there are personal things I don't interject into those that will really strike a chord, but
Yeah.
it, it's one of those situations where, like you said, you can empathize and you can feel for somebody, but when you go into a community like most recently Altadena and the Palisades, it's been affected by fires, and you go in and you say, "Hey, me and 1,300 of my neighbors lost our homes on October 9th, 2017 in the Tubbs fire, and here's how we recovered, and we're 95 at this point more than 95% recovered." They kind of look at you and they're like, "Oh, like you're a peer."
Yeah.
Like what I've been through. You've
Yeah.
felt these feelings. And so when I say something, there's a little bit more credence to it because it's coming from experience instead of education, right? I didn't read it in a book. I lived it. So it helps people with their recovery because they hear somebody that has actually been through it, and now being almost 9 years out from it, being able to go, I've had people visit us and be like, wait, so which house is burned down? They visit the neighborhood and it's like every single one you can see from
Yeah.
where you're standing. And they're just like, wow. And it's like, yeah, so you can do this too. I know it doesn't seem like it, but you can do it too.
No, I think as humans, we do appreciate when we can see somebody else that's got through it and multiple people that can get through it as well. Like, it would be less powerful if you were the only person who is better off to the situation, right? Like
Hmm.
the whole community came together, built it like it's a blueprint for that community. Like, hey, this can be done and we can
Right.
get through it. I am interested though, right? Like you effectively got forced into like you chose a little bit, but like the community were like, Jeff, we love what you're doing. Keep helping us. And they pushed you into this position of leadership. And you're able to just stand up and go with it. And like you said, it was a little bit part of like, I need to help myself recover as well. So I'm going to do this. But that doesn't just happen. Like, other people, you could push them and they're just going to crumble. But instead,
Yeah.
you stood up, it made you stronger. You helped the community, you dragged people up. And it's been this amazing story. And like, I mean, I'm sitting here very touched by the story. And I've heard it before. Where does that come from? Like, where does that like
Yeah.
strength, like inside, come from? Like, is it from your upbringing? Is it past
Yeah.
experiences, or did this just sort of just ignite something in your body, and like all of a sudden you're like, I didn't even know personally that I had this in me.
I mean, I think it's two things. The smaller, more minor part of it is like I've always enjoyed pursuing leadership opportunities, whether being in on a decision making process to better a group or a business or now the city. I've always enjoyed that challenge and that opportunity. But the greater part of it, and a much greater part of it, is my upbringing. I think my family has a lot of selfless service that they've done either personally or professionally. I have six nurses, aunts and cousins, two uncles that were police officers. My grandfather was a police officer. Both grandfathers served in World War II. My uncle served in Vietnam. My aunt served in the first Gulf War. So there was like this whole, I was always around people. My dad served on Windsor Town Council. My mom worked child support services. So there was always this, I was always around people that were doing things bigger than themselves. And many times either not getting compensated enough for what they do, or not, in terms of Windsor Town Council, they're not getting compensated at all. You brave the slings and arrows of the general public in local politics, and you don't get paid for it. So I think that's kind of one of those things where I saw a lot of people that were selfless like that, and then also being around my wife, her family, comes from a military family. Her father served in Iraq, and she had uncles and grandparents that served in the military as well. And just kind of one of those things where you kind of like, when you're in a position financially, mentally, to better your community in some way, shape, or form, for me, it almost feels like an obligation. There's this quote I throw out a lot, from Muhammad Ali, that says, "Selfless service for others is the rent we pay for our place on this earth." It's something that I kind of like, right? And that's why, when people talk about the political side of me, who do you look to as either mentors or people that you follow? I point to two people on both sides of the aisle, right? And that's one's John McCain and one's Bobby Kennedy. Both of them were known for being great politicians, for putting, neither of them were perfect, but they were also believed in service above self. And that's something that I think my family instilled in me, and that I've always tried to do, is it regardless of what it does, the minor strain that it could put on me, if it betters the community, if it betters other people's lives, then, there's a value in that.
That's amazing. That having that example in front of you, I'm sure, it does make a big difference. Just for like people like me that's sort of trying to figure this all out. Like, what would you say to me in terms of like, how do I get involved and help my community? What would your words of advice be?
Oh man, the great thing, I mean, if we want to focus on Sonoma County, I know you're not necessarily Sonoma County based, but in North Bay and Sonoma County specifically, there's a lot of opportunities historically where this frontier society that existed when California was incorporated, right? And so a lot of people bring up like, why are there 42 school districts in Sonoma County? It's like, well, because we didn't have roads connecting cities. I mean, it was literally just population bases
Yeah.
around, and that's how with a one-room schoolhouse, that's just how they developed, right? So we have all of these school boards. We have all of these, whether it's like the Russian River, there's all of these boards you could volunteer for, and there's not enough people to do it, whether it's a school board, water board, putting in to go onto a planning commission, something like that. And then even the North Bay, um, Sonoma County specifically has more nonprofits per capita than anywhere else in the nation. And so there's an opportunity to just volunteer your time. I mean, and there's places like a food bank that'll be like, if you can show up once a month or every other month and just help us pack boxes, it makes a world of difference for the people that are volunteering there and the people that are receiving those services. And you could find a nonprofit to cover just about anything that you are interested with. If it's animals, if it's specific types of animals, whether it's a rescue of some sort for like the bird rescue, there's a wild bird rescue here, or volunteering time at an organization like Verity that helps victims of assault and abuse, or anything in between, homeless services, food scarcity, equity, whatever it is, you can find something. You just, it takes maybe 5 minutes. You just have to be willing to do it and stick with it. I was talking to my wife about something unrelated to this morning, but it's like, if you do something for a couple of daily for like 2 weeks, it becomes a habit, right? So if you're volunteering and you're like, hey, I'm going to volunteer once a week or once a month, set a time period. Don't you like, I'm going to do it once and see how I like it. Like, no, I'm going to volunteer once a week for 2 months or once a month for 6 months. And then after that, it becomes habit, and you will maybe start making relationships or be offered more opportunities. There are hundreds, thousands of opportunities for somebody in this community to be involved. You just got to be willing to look and take that effort and, get uncomfortable. That's the other part of it, right? It's like, how do I put myself forward and how do I talk? Like, if I don't, whenever I'm in front of a group or I'm talking at council on the dais or something, I always think I'm rambling and all over the place, and I'm jittery and nervous and whatever. And then I'll go back, because I'm a masochist. I'll go back and rewatch it on YouTube when I get home to be like, was I really that bad? And then I'll watch it. I was like, oh, I was actually all right. Like, that made sense. And I got across. Okay, cool.
Yep.
It's, there are very few people that have that assertive confidence, that know exactly what they want to say, and they feel very comfortable in front of groups. You just got to put the normal average everyday person just has to put themselves in an uncomfortable position, whether that's speaking in front of groups or just going to an organization where know nobody and say, hey, I just want to volunteer, and then maybe you make relationships and maybe you find purpose. Maybe a light goes off and you're like, I want to change the direction of my career. I want to work in nonprofits. I don't want to work in finance. I think that's really important for people.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to insert just, hey, nonprofits, please make it easier for people to volunteer. Go follow the advice of Redwood Empire Food Bank. They do a great job of making the ability to volunteer
100%.
accessible. There's a neighboring food bank to the south that makes it much, much harder to get the same, do the same work. So if you make it easier, I know we have to cater for the lazy. Like, it's just a fact. And so to make it a little bit easier. But I agree, there's lots of great opportunities out there. I love going to the food bank and doing the work. Once a year, we take my boys as well and get them involved, for lack of a better word, an easy way to really make a difference in the community. So
Yeah.
I would recommend that as an option, especially if you want to just get your toes wet.
Yeah, and I mean, I would even push back and say it may not even be lazy, right? It may just be like nervous and scared. Like, they may seem like, is it? I don't know if I can. I just want an easy way to do this because I don't want to go and put myself out there or whatever, right? Like, but to your point, like, get your toes wet and be like, oh, this isn't bad. Like, now I'm going to, call my friends and be like, hey, what are you doing for 2 hours Thursday night? Nothing, right? You're going to go go and have a beer and then watch reality TV? How about you do something for 2 hours that's going to make you feel really good and make a difference?
Man, the trained politician came through in that response. I love it. Jeff, tell me about this question, right? There has to be something about leadership that you learned through this whole
Mm.
part of your life since 2017 that you would have never learned anywhere else. What is it, and like, what can we take away from becoming a leader in this very adverse way?
Yeah, I think there's two things that I always say when I give leadership advice, and the overarching concept is that ego kills progress. And if you have too much ego, it can really hinder your and your organization's ability to move forward. And the two things I always say is there's this Bear Bryant is this famous college football coach. He was the original coach at Alabama during their massive successful career era. And he had this thing where he says, if something goes wrong, I did it. If something goes well, we did it. If something goes great, you did it. Right? You don't need to have saying like, I made this call and I did this. If his team won a championship, he went into the locker room and said, you guys did great. You did this. You did this. Right? Instilling confidence in others and giving people, what's the term? Giving people their flowers and making sure that they feel valued. The other aspect of ego kills progress is know what you're good at and then know what you're not good at and surround yourself with people that are good at that. So when we're doing like Coffey Strong or as that nonprofit, or we're doing stuff at the city, like I know there's things that, I'm good at and that I can handle this. I can talk about this. Economic development, that is something that I can talk about all day. I'm very good at it. If you want to get into the nitty gritty of like the CalPERS unfunded liability at the city, I'm in a bad place. I can hit like the headlines, and then if you ask me specific questions, I'm in big trouble. So you lean on the experts, right? And knowing that you need that, knowing that you need to look and be like, hey, could you answer that question? I think it does two things. One, it helps better your organization. And when you have leaders or people that are in the spotlight that have a little bit of humility, it makes them real. I mean, you can't, if you lionize somebody to the point where you think they're infallible or want people to think that you're infallible, it's problematic because when you do make a mistake, then everything falls apart. So, and it's just, makes you more approachable, it makes you real. One of the things I really like doing, right now we're at the city, we're leading up to our budget hearings in 2 weeks, is I like to go and just talk to frontline rank and file staff about things that are going on and what their thoughts are. I went on a ride along with the fire department for 12 hours a couple of weeks ago with no command staff or people that usually talk to me from the city. They're people that usually don't see me and don't really know much about me other than he's a council member, and just sit there and talk to him and shoot the breeze. Those are the kind of things that I really focus on, is like, hey, make yourself a real person, make yourself understand what you're not good at. You're not good at, and it's like with any business, right? Like if you're not good at social media as an individual, as a CEO or whatever, find somebody that is, and so that they can create your presence and have you out there more, whatever it might be. Finances is also another one. I talked about CalPERS a little bit, like finances in general. You could be a great strategic thinker and great at identifying talent, but if you can't read a profit and loss statement, find somebody who can. And I think those are, and vice versa. You could have a CEO who's great at finance, but couldn't identify talent to hire if you if it mattered, with a gun to their head. So, but find somebody that can, like that, and be willing to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I love that. I like to add on, like, if you are building these teams, like, trust them. Like, if you've hired them in a position that's supposed to be a position of trust, like, actually do trust them. Because
Mhm.
one of the things that I see from the outside on some organizations, they hire this person to be their right-hand man, then don't listen to a single word that that person says. And it's
Mhm.
like, that doesn't help anything. Like, you've done everything on paper that sounds good. I hired the expert. Well, you have to listen to the expert. Like, if you're not listening to the expert, then what was the point in the first place?
Yeah, 100%. That's something that is very real. Again, ego, right? Like you could surround yourself with somebody, but if you're going to say, no, I know better than you, and it's like that CFO has finance experience and is a CPA, and you are not. So why would you know more about finances than that person? You won't. Like listen to them or find common ground, right? Like, hey, instead of doing it, the get to yes theory, right? Of like, hey, instead of doing exactly what I want to do, but not cutting it out completely, what can we get to within our structure of our organization and with the finances that we have to accomplish what we really want to accomplish?
So, Jeff, you have a day job, which is,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, after all of that, like, really has time for anything
Yeah.
between family and being a council member and
Mhm.
ride-alongs and everything else that goes on there. But you do live in the world of insurance.
I
Just
do.
like the headlines. What is your day job?
I'm a commercial insurance producer for George Peterson Insurance Agency here in Santa Rosa. I'm what we call, most of us these days are called generalists, which means we'll write anything, but a lot of us have focuses. Gone are the days of like, I write construction and construction only. You can thank the Great Recession for that, and you can thank COVID for that. So that, anybody that wrote nothing but restaurants when COVID happened, real hard time for them. And then anybody that wrote only for construction, 2008, real hard time for them. But my focuses are construction and development. I do a lot of developers and general contractors, all the way down through the sub trades and consultants. I do a significant amount of manufacturing as well, a lot in the wine and beer space, and a lot of nonprofits. But I have a couple here and there that are, just relationships or people that I've met and started working with that do, a variety of other things.
How did you get into the world of insurance?
Speaking of the Great Recession, so I graduated from Arizona State, and my senior year, I was working at a bar across the street from campus, and I was managing a bar, and I was splitting the cost of a condo with my parents, and my dad, who works in the same industry as me, or worked in the same industry as me, lost pretty much 60% of his book of business without losing a client between 2007 and 2009.
Well,
So in the beginning of 2008, he basically said, listen, I got to sell my half of the condo so I can sell it to you or we can sell it in general. And I was being a 20 nothing manager of a college bar. I didn't have a great deal of savings and loans weren't very plentiful back then. That had course corrected. I was like, well, I guess we have to sell. I got to find a job to support it. I was living in Arizona. Arizona was one of the hardest hit during the time. And then, so I started looking elsewhere, and insurance is generally recession proof. You always have to have insurance. Whether a certain industry gets hit is different, right? But if you, in the state of California, if you pay 1 cent of any sort of remuneration, whether that's payroll, bonus, what have you, you have to have workers' comp. If you own property, and there's a loan on it, you have to have property insurance. And then it's, general liability, you don't have to have by law unless you have certain licenses. But if you don't have it, you're a moron and you're going to go out of business soon. So he was like, hey, this office of ours in Santa Cruz is hiring. Do you want to interview? So I flew up there, interviewed, got hired, and that's how I started. The organization I was hired by was owned by a company called the Greater Bay Bank Corp, which a couple of months later got bought by Wells Fargo, became Wells Fargo Insurance, and about 16 months later, uh, about a third of my office got laid off at the same time.
well,
And so got laid off, looked for a job in Santa Cruz as long as I had my severance. And then because I couldn't find anything, I moved back up here. Ended up getting hired part-time at George Peterson, worked full-time, worked my way up to an agent, and that's where I am now.
quite a story. A lot of bumps and twists in that one.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where like I never thought I'd want to be in it. I was kind of forced in it. I kind of had to, pay some bills and support myself. And it's really turned out for the best because I've got to meet a lot of great people. I work for a great organization, and we're on a commission basis with a book of business, right? So if you're in real estate, right, you're on commission, but you don't have a year-to-year book. Other organizations do have that, so it's kind of that hybrid model,
Yeah.
which allows us a lot of freedom, right? It's the joke is you eat what you kill, right? It's a very a hunter kind of
Hmm.
mindset. So as long as you're selling, you're getting paid, and as long as you're retaining your clients and servicing them well, you get paid. So we don't have you got to clock in at this time, clock out at that time. You have to be,
Yeah.
like I don't even have vacation days. So like I can take 2 weeks off as long as my numbers and are being hit, and more importantly, as long as my staff that I work with is not complaining about me. That's probably the most important. If they start complaining about me, then I'll hear about it.
Thing. I'm assuming, like in your public sector position, you're having to make a lot of decisions. How much do you think that your experience in life in this area of insurance, where you're dealing with risk on a daily basis, affects that mindset in the way you go about, making those decisions?
Well, the city has insurance, so when we're getting sued, which we have to disclose, so you can go and see how often we get sued.
Hmm.
That play when we're talking about settlements for whatever it might be. Also, I think the private sector experience is important. We have a wide swath of backgrounds, whether it be individuals that are marriage family therapists or um, have worked in the public sector, but being in the private sector is for the economic development aspect of it, understanding how businesses are affected by certain things, because it's really easy to get blinders on when you're working at a city as to how this affects everyone else because you're used to a way of how certain things work. And so, yeah, I think it's, analyzing risk, analyzing, I'm not an actuary. I don't sit there and crunch the numbers, but
Yeah.
I also understand I analyze the risk, but I can also understand investment, and I'm not talking like the investment portfolio, but I'm talking like, hey, if we spend money on this, what does that mean down the line? Right.
Yeah.
So I think we all bring our own experiences to it, but I think it does help me have a more critical eye on some of the subjects that we have to cover.
What's your favorite part of your job in the insurance world?
My favorite job is being able to ask my favorite questions. So whenever I meet with a new client, I mean, there's always great things. Like I said, I deal with a lot of breweries, and I mean, those are just real laid back, cool people. I mean,
Hmm.
you can give them, a 10% increase in their premium, and they'll ask you if you want anything to go. And I'm like, dude, I just told you you're gonna have to pay more. Like, this is the best we can do, and you want to give me free stuff? That's always cool. But my favorite question when I deal with new people is tell me about your business. How this whole thing get started? Like talk about breweries. It could be a couple of friends that just liked making beer and spun off from somewhere else they worked, or you could have like a 4 generation, construction company, or a guy that laid tile for 23 years and was tired of answering to someone else and scraped their money together and begged, borrowed to get their business off. And just hearing the stories about how all of these businesses come to be. When you work for a large corporation like a Chase Bank or I don't know, advisory, company like Kinsey or something like that, it's one thing, right? But when you're talking to mom and pop shops, it's like, well, my family moved here in 1892 when we bought this acreage, and we used to grow hops, but then, it wasn't very fruitful for us. So we decided we were going to grow grapes and this other thing. And then we got into wine. But you hear this whole history of like the community, and it's
Yeah.
really, really cool. So that's my favorite part. Just learning about people and hearing their family stories about how they came to be. Because nobody just has like this boring story of like, I graduated high school and then I went to college and then I was like, I'm going to be a roofer.
Yeah.
Like, they always get into it somehow. And there's kind of like,
Yeah.
I think my story, like you just kind of like end up where you are.
Yeah.
And I always find that fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, there's never really any straight line stories that come with it. Everybody's
Yeah.
got something, right? And it could be as simple as like, hey, this is what I did, but I made this
Mhm.
big leap to do this decision. And
Yeah.
it is always good to hear that. Or, I see it as well. Obviously, we've got winery owners from this is what our families have done forever to I made a bunch of money somewhere else and just fell in love with the idea of
Mhm.
making, like, and everything in between.
Yeah.
I always appreciate hearing the background, and part of why I have these types of conversations as well is I love hearing people's origin stories, and gives me a bigger insight not just into the person I'm interviewing but just people in general, which I personally think makes me a better leader because I can, when I hear people's thoughts and what they're saying,
Yeah.
it makes me remember on a regular basis that everybody's journey is different. Everybody sees the world slightly differently, and we all experience the same situation in vastly different ways. And we need to be able to take that into account to be able to have good interactions with people.
Yeah. I agree.
So you have two jobs. What is it like a regular week in the life of just Jeff Okrepkie look like? Like what's going on?
So that's funny. So I get those emails. I get emails all the time of like, oh yeah, whether it be for work or for council, it's like, oh, let's get together. When are you available? And I always reply with the same thing. I was like, hey, my schedule is hectic and it's irregular. I don't have regular times of anything. So why don't you give me 5 times when you're able to meet, and I'll pick one. So it depends. Like this week on Monday afternoon, we had the second interviews for a city manager because we're hiring a new city manager. Tuesday morning, I had public safety subcommittee, followed by a council meeting that lasted from noon till about 6. Then yesterday, came into worked for a while, had a couple of client meetings, then had a meeting at at the city hall, then 2 meetings at city hall back to back. Today, I get to just kind of, I had some meetings get canceled at City Hall, which was always nice, give me more time here. And then I get to take my kid to soccer tonight, and then tomorrow come in and work. And next week I go to Washington, D.C. for a day. I fly out on a Tuesday, spend Wednesday in D.C., fly back Thursday. And then the week after that, I go to a conference in Maui for work. So it's I mean, that's part of the issue with running for city councils. You need people that have the ability to be nimble and have flexible schedules. It's because you can't say I work a 9 to 5 and I'm only available during these hours.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah, the community keeps breathing, keeps moving, right? And
Mhm.
if we want to serve, we got to be available. So
Yeah, absolutely.
be great. So you've sort of touched on it along the way in multiple ways, but it's clear to me that your family is really important to you and a big part of your life. Anything you like to share? Like, what's one of the favorite things you guys doing? I know cooking dinner on Valentine's seems
Yeah.
a great tradition, but like, what else? Like, what keeps you guys busy?
Um, Youth sports.
Mm.
So I'm a 7-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. We're in the throes of Little League and softball right now. And then my son plays competitive soccer in the fall, and my daughter wants to start competitive soccer. She also does dance, and he also does flag football. And so we've got it kind of mapped out where it doesn't overlap too much, but there's there months like April and the beginning of May, and then October, the beginning of November, or end of September, beginning and all of October are just madness because of so much going on. We like to travel. We're going to Europe in the fall. We like to go do kind of off the beaten path kind of things, like not go to like resorts or stuff like that if we can plan that. Like we went to Chihuahua, Mexico last year. That was their first international trip. We go to Arizona a lot. I still have a lot of friends down there. We go watch football games. We were there for spring training last month. And so we like to travel and do like experiential things and kind of like expose them to more than just what's on a iPad or TV or at the local rec center kind of a thing. Like go and see what's going on in the real world and in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So like one of the things that was really interesting with my kids was they've seen, there's the unhoused population and people dealing with homelessness, and kids learn what that is at a young age because it's so prevalent throughout the country, and so they know what homelessness is here. But then when we go to some place like rural Mexico and see like real poverty,
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing where there's like, oh, okay, so there's a spectrum of this, and um, having those kind of like really high level but like serious conversations, because you can't get too deep into the philosophies of social economic issues, socioeconomic
Yep.
issues with a 7-year-old, but you can be like, yeah, like there's being homeless here where there's streets, and there's being homeless there or where there's dirt roads and no running water and no access to services.
And
Yeah,
coyotes in both forms of the word.
yeah, exactly.
I just had this conversation this week about just like finding opportunities to show your kids the world, show them different communities, different ways people live. Because let's face it, we as much as there is problems in our communities, it's still a pretty insulated community in the North Bay of California. We
Hmm.
all generally live a very good life from sort of thing. So anywhere we go, there's always the opportunity. We're just in Southern Oregon, like there's opportunity to show people that it's a very different life up there than it is
For
where
sure.
we grew up, especially us in good old Marin County. But Jeff, I've really appreciated this conversation. We do like to end with 5 rapid fire questions. So I have them for you. If you're ready, I'll shoot.
Let's go.
And I think this one ties in perfectly. What is the dream vacation?
Dream vacation. That is a tough one. One where I don't have to answer emails on my phone and I can like not have to worry about work at all. I think it's one of the downfalls of modern technology. But as far as location, I don't know. I've always wanted to, my family's from Ukrainian descent, so I've always wanted to visit where that part of my family's from, and the other part of my family's from Scotland. So I think if we could somehow link those two, they're not close, but they're on the same continent. So if we
Sort
could somehow link those two and see the
of.
history of where my family came from, and
Yeah.
also avoid work, I think that would be it.
Well, the one's very viable at the moment. The other one I wouldn't recommend as a trip at this point in time.
Nope.
Do you prefer audiobooks or paper books?
Mostly, I got diagnosed with severe ADHD when I was a kid. So like sitting and looking at something is not really super productive for me. Like
Mm.
multiple reading pages multiple times is a common thing. So what I'll usually do is I'll have both and like try to be able to, like if I have like 20 minutes to sit down and read a chapter, I can get through a chapter. But then if I'm working out or driving or whatever, I listen to the audiobook and then catch up. But it's more accessible to me.
If you have 20 minutes to exercise, what would that exercise be?
20 minutes to exercise. You know what? I was doing running for a while now, and I'm at of the age where my joints start to fail, or at least they seem like they're going to fail. And I got a rowing machine, so has really helped because it's good cardio, but it also legs, back, and bicep workout because of the resistance and everything. So there's a little bit of muscle and a lot of cardio on that. So I'd probably go with my rowing machine.
I've been circling around one of those to add to my home gym for a while now. So that might just be the inspiration to push for it. You're on a deserted island. What 3 items do you bring along?
Do I have access to mobile data?
You have anything. This is a magical world where anything is possible.
Probably an iPad if I could have access to mobile data. I mean, we're gonna go down the whole thing of like I can FaceTime people then, and I can stream movies or whatever.
This is your dream world. You can do whatever you like.
Probably that. A knife, because even though I like to watch those guys, like I can fashion a knife out of anything, I cannot. So something to cut with it immediately. And then, oh man, let's go. 3 things. That's 2 sunglasses.
Love it. Last question. Take me back to your childhood. What was that like perfect meal that you had as a kid? And if you think about right now, brings true.
Oh, dude, this is the So the fancy meal we had when I was a kid. Again, my parents moved out from upstate New York, and they both got enough jobs to pay for the mortgage, and then so they had to find more ways to pay for things, right? So like I joke always like tomato soup and grilled cheese. I was like, oh, that goes great together. And I was like, when I was growing up, that was 2 separate meals. Like we had tomato soup one night, we had a grilled cheese night. But our fancy meal that I still do to this day, because it is just the nostalgia is so thick, is shake and bake pork chops, stovetop stuffing, and because we're of Ukrainian descent, pierogies or vareniki if you're Ukrainian. So that is a meal that was like the fancy meal we got, even though it's not anywhere near. It's frozen pierogies, it's stovetop from a box, and it's shake and bake. But that was like we were eating like kings when I was a kid. So that is one, like I've even had that conversation about what would your last meal be. I was like, that's on the list. So I would go with that.
Love it. Jeff, I appreciate your time. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you for being a guest.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
And with that, we ended another Protea Conversations. Thank you for joining us in this journey of learning and inspiration. Today, we've gained insight from our guest and taken another step towards understanding the diverse tapestry of leadership in business and accounting. Remember, each conversation is a step towards the positive transformation of business leaders. We hope our discussion has given you valuable takeaways to apply in your own career and life. Don't forget to subscribe to Protea Conversations on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so connect with me on social media channels. I'm most active on LinkedIn and would love you to join the conversation. Join us next time for more engaging stories, advice, and conversations that matter. Until then, keep striving for excellence, embracing growth. Thank you for listening, be kind, and goodbye from Protea Conversations.